Welcome to the Meat and Potatoes podcast. Today we're joined by Jake Wood, who is the founder and CEO of Groundswell. How are you, Jake?
Hey, I'm doing well, Garrett.
It is good to see you again. You were out with our community in September at Summit. How have things been?
Things have been great. It seems like a lifetime ago I was out in Salt Lake City visiting you and sharing the stage. Things have been going well. I think, last time we were together at Silicon Slopes, we had maybe just come out of beta with our product. And so that means that, we've been in the market now for 6 or 7 months. And like any early stage startup, that means that, we're getting customers, but as a CEO, never as many customers as I'd like. So, we're doing our best to turn it up and put our foot on the gas.
All right, I love it. Let's start with what Groundswell is. Let's talk about where the idea came from and a little bit of the founding story.
Yeah, so Groundswell is a corporate philanthropy as a service platform. What we do is we help companies make giving and philanthropy a part of their culture and ultimately really a part of their total compensation approach. So the platform provides employees with personal giving accounts that they can then gift or match funds into. So think of it kind of like a tax advantaged account for charity, like an HSA or a 401k. And so, one of the things that we believe is that with the shifting demographics in the workforce, younger generations want to have impact alongside the profit that they're generating. And I think a lot of companies are still trying to figure that out. So Groundswell certainly trying to ride that wave. As well, it's really an effort by companies to truly invest in the diversity of their teams. So many times I saw when I was a nonprofit executive that companies would give away money to whatever the CEO's pet cause was. And that's great for the CEO. And maybe the employees look at it and think it's cool that the company's giving away money, but they also probably don't resonate with that cause that matters to the CEO. And what Groundswell does is it empowers employees to send money to the solutions that they think are best, to the problems that they think are most pressing. And what's more empowering than that?
Yeah, absolutely. I pulled this little snippet: give like Gates, taxed like Buffett, and recognized like Rockefeller. And to your point previously, if you're at the top, you kind of get to decide a lot of things, including where charitable donations go. And if you're an employee, you don't have any options, then you don't have any options. So that's what you guys are solving for, it sounds like.
Yeah, exactly. And prior to starting Groundswell, I ran a nonprofit for 10 years, a large nonprofit, really well known, raised a lot of money. I think in total I helped raise over $350 million. And we raised a lot of money from billionaires, the Gates, the Buffetts of the world, not them specifically, but I probably raised money from 10 different billionaires. And one of the things that I observed was billionaires have all sorts of resources for how they give money away to charity. They have foundations and tax advantage vehicles. They have consultants and advisors. They have, experts that they go get to make them smarter on particular subjects. And I just thought, that it was, I don't know, just so unfortunate that an average person in, the middle America who was giving us $25 was actually probably giving us a more meaningful portion of their wealth or income, but didn't have the same efficiencies and tools that high net worth people did. And so when I was thinking about what I was going to start next, some words of advice were echoing in my head that had been shared with me by one of my mentors who said, Jake, the next billion-dollar ideas take things that only rich people have access to and democratize them for everyone else.
Yeah, that's great advice. All right, so the complexities are in the building of the platform and the validating of the business model. And you mentioned your previous experience with Team Rubicon. Not for the faint of heart. Raising $1 is hard. Raising hundreds of millions is exceedingly hard. While you're also like running the operations and responding to disasters. This is kind of a different speed, a little bit of a different game. How have you kind of built the team in and around you, similar to the way you did with Team Rubicon, where you could leverage the platform, have a top-notch tech stack, and have something that works?
Yeah, I mean, so you mentioned the name. Team Rubicon was the nonprofit that I'd founded back in 2010 and ran for 11 years. And it's totally different running a nonprofit. Particularly, think about it. We started that organization as a nonprofit in 2010 in the shadow of the Great Recession. It was really hard to convince people to invest in a new unproven idea. And so we really had to scrape by in those early years, trying to build the airplane while we were flying it with bare minimum funds to hire staff or to invest in the tools needed to do the job well. And then you fast forward, and we started Groundswell. We were fortunate enough to bring together an incredible cap table with investors like Google Ventures, Human Ventures, and Felicis Ventures, and others, some great angel investors as well. And before even going out and building the product, we had almost 15 million in capital. And I just remember sitting around looking at the early executive team and thinking to myself, this is remarkable that you can maybe go out and build a company that way. Now, there's all sorts of traps associated with that as well. You can spend that money foolishly. You can become complacent with that type of funds, be lazy in your approach. I think one of the things we've observed over the last 2 years as the venture-backed companies have melted down is that a lot of bad executives, bad business ideas got kind of brushed under the rug with enough capital. If you had $100 million, you were going to be able to find product market fit, even if you were a bad CEO or had a bad product. You can't hide. The emperor has no clothes in this situation. So in some ways, I think that my experience running a nonprofit prepared me for this moment, because you had to figure out how to be really disciplined in how you spend and how you grow. Well, at the same time, I've been able to take advantage of having access to that early capital, go out and find world-class talent, bring them in, ensure that they can be comfortable and make a living, while at the same time being really hungry in the pursuit of our mission.
Yeah. We're going to talk, we'll weave in all of your previous experiences into, this current role. So I downloaded the Groundswell app, and we were talking a little bit before. I don't download more than one app every 5 years, but and I typed in Silicon Slopes, right? We're a nonprofit, and it was in there. And if an employee joins a company, and Groundswell is part of that onboarding, if they felt so inclined in this particular case to give to Silicon Slopes, they could do that seamlessly through the platform. Theoretically, the companies could match. And at the end of the year, there'd be all the taxes and all of that stuff. And that's the only worry they'd really need to is figure out who they want to donate to. Is that correct?
Yeah, that sums it up. There's a lot of advantages to giving through a donor advised fund. Again, this is how rich people give. And if rich people know how to do one thing, it's be efficient with their money. So donor advised funds, lots of advantages among them, and perhaps most interesting for the crowd of the audience you have here, you can very easily donate non-cash assets into a donor advised fund. So best example would be stock. If you bought, Tesla stock 5 years ago, despite the fact that it's lost 50% of its value recently, you're probably up 400% on your initial cost basis. If you're going to donate $1,000 to Silicon Slopes, which you should, by the way, if you're listening, it's don't write a check for $1,000. Dear God, don't do it on your American Express card where you're going to pay 4% in fees. Instead, you should transfer 1 or 2 shares of Tesla into a Groundswell account where you have all of that appreciated value. And when you do that, you can take the full market value of that stock as a deduction on your taxes, but you don't have to pay capital gains on it. So you've saved yourself 15, 20% in capital gains taxes by giving that way. Again, this is how rich people give. And so, it's really valuable for employees at companies maybe that are going public or going through an acquisition. They want to do some tax planning. Charity is a big part of their life. They can move a portion of their RSUs into a donor advised fund, take the full, basically wipe out their tax bill in that year, and then give that money out over the subsequent 2 or 3 years to causes that they really care about. So those are some of the things that people should be thinking about when given through a donor advised fund.
Yeah. And there's a lot that goes into it, the donor advised fund. And thank you for providing that crystal clear context. We were just in New York, and we were at the Met, and you've got all the usual suspects on the on the wings and on the walls there. You've got the Roosevelts and the Carnegies and the Rockefellers and the Kochs and the Schwartzmans. And we had an intern ask, like, I wonder how much they donated for this. And my answer, not being an expert, but knowing a little bit, is not as much as you think, because to your point, they're dialed in on how to do that, and they probably did it in all sorts of ways that a layman wouldn't understand. The end result was great for both, but it allows someone like me to live in their world, at least as far as philanthropy goes.
Yeah, I mean, now we got a new life goal for you, Garrett, and that's to have a wing at the Met named after you. I mean, I think you got some work ahead of you, but we can all aspire. But that's, I mean, that when you mentioned the give like Gates, get recognized like Rockefeller, kind of a mantra around here. We want everyone to get out of their philanthropy. What rich people do. Again, like, we want the world to be more charitable. We want the world to be more outward facing and empathetic and compassionate. And ultimately, Groundswell's trying to unlock the inner philanthropist in everyone.
Yeah. And for whatever reason, through your upbringing or just the way you were born, you inherently are, it seems, drawn to helping people, right? Whether as a Marine or Team Rubicon or currently. Why is that so important to you? You've got thousands of stories, but if you can sum it up, why has this kind of been the focus of your life so far?
It's hard to pin any one thing. I'm very fortunate and blessed. I grew up in a great family. Both two loving parents, roof over my head, never had a want for anything. And I think I always was self-aware enough to realize that I was blessed. And I was also just kind of thrust into situations where, and perhaps it was because of choices I'd made, but where, like, standing on the sidelines was not an option. 9/11 happened while I was in college. I ended up joining the Marine Corps as a result. The Marine Corps taught me about not just service and sacrifice and all of those things, but also demonstrated to me in serving in a platoon, a very diverse platoon, just how stratified America is. You go to war with 35 Marines and you see folks that are from, Native American Indian reservation. You see someone from, Puerto Rico. You serve with a guy that grew up in Watts here in California and Los Angeles. You realize just, again, how blessed you are. But then you also get this global perspective. I served in Afghanistan and Iraq. Afghanistan's one of the poorest nations in the world. You see human rights abuses happening at a scale that people can't even fathom. And it's kind of hard to walk away from that and not think about how you can help make the world a better place. So, I never really intended to start a nonprofit after the Marine Corps. It just kind of happened, but I'm lucky that, I stumbled into co-founding Team Rubicon, doing disaster response, humanitarian relief around the world. And again, it just continued to provide me this context on how blessed I was. We'd go into these communities following disasters and we'd see, how folks on the other side of the train tracks lived. We'd see how people around, on the other corners of the globe lived. And you constantly were reminded of just how fortunate you are. And again, I think with that type of good fortune comes great responsibility.
Yeah. And to your credit, you've taken that yoke. I personally think what you've done in your career and what you're currently doing is very admirable. I think I'm accurate in saying this. America is by far the most charitable and philanthropic nation on planet Earth. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's accurate. And number two is not even close. But I think most people underestimate the philanthropic sector in the U.S. It's almost a $500 billion business in the U.S. About $480 billion in, I think, 2022 was given, which is just a remarkable number when you think about it.
Yeah. And it does require effort and thinking through things. And what you guys are building is making it more seamless. So as you guys build the product, you've got to find a couple of markets, right? You need the companies to participate, and you need people to participate from, an individual level. How are you guys building the next iteration of Groundswell now that you have a little bit of runway underneath you?
Yeah, our primary go-to-market is, again, selling to companies and positioning this as an employee benefit. So we see a couple of industries as our ideal initial target markets, mostly within professional service firms. You think about white-collar industries like accounting and tax advisory, law, investment management. You have, I think, an easier sell there because you have folks that have a bit of a higher median education level, certainly higher financial literacy, high revenue per head. Typically, those types of companies are run cash flow positive versus a lot of the tech space where I think this is a tougher sell. And
Yeah.
they're also hyper competitive from a talent perspective. These white collar firms are losing people because I think a lot of folks during the pandemic sat there and said, "Hey, why am I slaving 80 hours for this law firm? This doesn't add value to my life. I'm not, I'm sitting here working on, I don't know, real estate contracts. Like, what am I doing? How am I having impact in the world?" And I think there was a big reset for folks. And so we see that as kind of a great opportunity for us. We're trying to find those folks like anybody else in their go-to-market strategy. We're doing a lot of outbound sales. We're stalking folks on LinkedIn, retargeting people. We're going to begin doing in-person events this year. And, we hope, like everybody else, that we can weather the coming recession, and fight through the economic headwind that's brewing. I think there's a lot of uncertainty around that, but we like our chances because we think we have a good team and we know we have a great product.
Yeah, that's awesome. You're pretty humble, so I'm going to bring it up. You wrote a book called Once a Warrior, and I read it. I started reading it when we first met, and I texted you when I had finished it a month or so later. Beautifully written, well done, and it tells the story of you in college, Marine Corps, building Team Rubicon, and there's a lot of things like, here's the thesis or here's the plan, get punched in the face, change things. Like, in particular, a lot people are familiar with that with anything regarding the military. It never goes as it's supposed to. But with Team Rubicon, it was just constant. In your words, all sorts of curveballs and like, should we keep going? I'm interested in, of all of your experiences, how are you applying those to a startup? Because the startup has its own level of misery as well.
Yeah, I think that there are some things that are universal, whether you're starting, a software company, whether you're starting a nonprofit, whether you're on a battlefield or in a combat zone. You were in the military, you're familiar perhaps with the phrase VUCA, which is kind of the military's framework for chaos. And it kind of frames out for folks volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. And those are kind of the four elements of a chaotic scenario, or the fog of war, as people would call it in the military. And I think those are the elements that you find in any new venture. You have a new team that's coming together, trying to figure out how to work together. You have uncertainty with what your go-to-market is going to be and how customers are going to respond. You don't know what the bugs and kinks in your product are going to be. You have the macro, elements like the economy, which is what we're facing right now, and the drag on investment capital and everything else. So how do you cut through that? I think you need to have clarity of mission. I think you need to have not just clarity of mission, but clarity in communications. People need to be singing off the same sheet of music. You can't afford to have misunderstandings on your team. Everybody needs total alignment on what the priorities are and the strategies for achieving them. That goes hand in hand with not getting distracted, right? I think there's a lot of opportunities for people to go chase shiny objects early because everything is new. Everything appears to be green space, but you have to be disciplined in what it is that you do. And lastly, you have to be really, really committed to building a world-class team and empowering them with a world-class culture. And those things don't happen by accident. They don't happen overnight. They are deliberate, they're time-consuming, but over time, that becomes the ultimate moat. People love talking about moats in the startup space. What are you building that other people can't overcome? And certainly there are product moats, there are network effect moats that you can create, capital moats that you can create. But I think culture moats are really powerful because they're almost impossible to rip and recreate. So we've been focusing on those things. We got a long way to go. I can't pretend we have some secret formula, but we're getting there.
Yeah. So wherever this idea was germinated in your brain or on a napkin, on a whiteboard, as you start building things out, start building the team, theses come up of like, this is how it's going to work. This is how people are going to use it. This is how they're going to buy it. Here's the business model. And that changes, right? As it lives out in the wild. There's happy times and sad times. You were way off or you were spot on. In that you guys, have some traction now. What are some of the fun stories you're hearing? If you simplify it to a happiness quotient of, there's some really good feedback and some really good stories. What makes you smile once or twice a week?
Yeah, we're taking, one or two customers live each week. And it's always amazing when you can go on to LinkedIn or Twitter and see, a rank and file employee who's going out and, shouting from the rooftops about how awesome their company, their employer is because they just gave them, whatever the number is, $100, $500, $1,000 a year to support whatever the cause is that matters most to them. I used that word earlier, empowering. There's something really empowering about your boss saying, "Hey, we're all different, and what matters to Garrett is going to be different than what matters to Jake and what matters to Julie over in accounting, and we're not going to pretend like we can make any singular central decision for how we're going to support the world around us, but instead we want to empower you to support what matters most." You see these people celebrating that online, and they say, things like, "Man, I love working for an employer who would do something like this." And those are the moments that validate what we're trying to accomplish. We need about 100 times more of them, but when we see them come in, it's really powerful.
Yeah, I assume that's going to be one of the funnest parts of your guys' journey as you build this out. Because whether when we're kids, like if I won the lottery, I'd give my money to this person, or even now, like we all have folks that we can give it to. I had a podcast right before you with Ducks Unlimited, right? And the reason they were on Business Silicon Slopes podcast is the Great Salt Lake is in a bit of a pickle right now, and the entire ecosystem, whether you hunt, fish, bird watch, or just like breathing clean air, at least here locally, would be impacted, right? And so a lot of folks that might not want to hunt ducks, Ducks Unlimited would be a good fit for them. But when you hear of how people would give away money, it really gives a nice window into how they think and their personalities, and it's just got to be really a fun thing for you guys to watch.
Yeah, no doubt about it. I mean, I love this idea of equipping people with the tools to be more involved in the community. You think about all all the challenges that our communities and our society writ large have, and we can do a lot if we just kind of taught people to care more. So
yeah, absolutely. Okay, as we've kind of woven in your history here, hardest thing that you've done so far is startup, Team Rubicon nonprofit, being a Marine, being a dad, or writing a book.
Hardest thing for each of those?
Which is the hardest?
Oh, which is the hardest? Oh, great question. Being a dad is not the hardest. It's certainly the most rewarding, the most surprising. And I met a guy about a year ago who said something that always stuck with me. He said, fatherhood is the only thing in life that ever lived up to the hype. Starting a business, joining the Marine Corps, those things have a lot of hype. The only thing that actually lives up to the hype is fatherhood. And that was pretty profound. But I think, the hardest thing I've ever done was probably running Team Rubicon, starting Team Rubicon, a nonprofit, shot of the Great Recession. I just got out of the Marine Corps. I didn't know the first thing about running a business. And, we had to find a way, and tons of challenges. We managed to hit that escape velocity. Today, the organization $65 million a year budget. It's hard to imagine back in 2010 when it was $65,000 a year. So,
Yeah. No, that's got to be very, very rewarding. What are you most excited about? Last question here, for you and your team as you look into 2023.
yeah, I mean, this is a make or break year for us. We have got to prove product market fit. We've got to go back out and convince investors to invest another big round in us in order for us to accomplish our vision and our mission. So, I think we have this really amazing opportunity, which is we control our own destiny. I think we've got a great team. We've got a bunch of tailwinds behind us. I believe that there are some things happening in our space that even just over the last couple of weeks with some things that are happening to our competitors that are opening up a window of opportunity for us that if we capture it, we can build something really special. That means we have to execute. We have to execute almost flawlessly. The one thing I'm confident in is this team's ability to execute. So that's just an exciting, it's just an exciting opportunity. Will we capture it or will we not? The stakes are high.
Yeah, and so far you've taken that gauntlet and everything else you've done. If folks want to get involved and want to learn more, best place they can do that.
Yeah, well, they can certainly check out what we're doing at Groundswell by visiting www.groundswell.io. I'd love to connect with anybody on LinkedIn if they're listening. I'm pretty easy to find. You can just look for Jake Wood. I'm not quite sure what the URL there is, but I'd probably show up pretty close to the top. And then lastly, if you're interested in Team Rubicon, the nonprofit, great organization. You can get involved either by supporting financially or supporting as a volunteer. They do incredible work, and they're at teamrubiconusa.org.
Awesome. Well, it's been really great getting to know you over the last 6 months, and count me as a big proponent of everything you guys are doing, and it just really jives well, right? I texted you, and I was like, I was always ashamed that this job was actually a little bit hard compared with other things, and hearing you say it was very validating. So thank you so much, Jake. I know you're busy with everything. Appreciate you taking the time, and hopefully we can have you back out at our events here, and for sure maybe in a year. Let's see how it went for you.
Let's hope. Looking forward to joining your community again in 2023.
Awesome. Thank you, Jake.
Thank you.